Growing up, I was always fascinated by the golden age of travel. A time when you dressed up to get on a plane, when every seat came with a flute of fine champagne. You didn't score a cheap fare, you embarked on a journey. The larger world seemed so distant back then, so exotic, so alluring. Films like Casablanca or Lawrence of Arabia, even the early Bond movies, painted faraway lands through an amber lens of mystique and melodrama. This feeling is something I constantly seek as a traveler. And in this new era of reward points and discount airlines, it's a feeling that is harder and harder to come by. But just an hour north of Amman, the capital of Jordan, lies a curious city where, in many ways, time has frozen. It's a place called As-Salt. Nestled in the arid valleys just south of the Syrian border, As-Salt is a city with a story. Like the rest of Jordan, it's been settled by one group or another for thousands of years. While you may assume its name comes from some kind of salt-related trade, it's actually derived from the Latin saltus, meaning forest. Throughout its past, this place served as a critical link between the eastern and western worlds, connecting the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula to the Mediterranean and the rest of Europe. While it was first formally settled by the Romans, As-Salt's golden age came at the end of the 19th century, during the most prosperous years of Ottoman rule. Thanks to the wealthy merchants and traders who settled here during this time, the center of the city is teeming with spectacular mansions, minarets, and meandering stairways. To wander the streets of As-Salt is to step back in time, back to a bygone era when the spice trade ruled the world and the distractions of modern life were non-existent. And while a stroll through the city is arguably the best part of a visit to As-Salt, we're going to start with something a bit different. A stop at the museum. To fully appreciate all that As-Salt is, you have to look at not only what it is today, but where it came from. And there's no better place to learn the history of this settlement than by visiting the historic Old Salt Museum. Now, normally, I'm not the biggest fan of museums, but this thoughtful exhibition of As-Salt's past gave our short visit to the city so much color and context. It sits just off the central plaza inside the majestic Abu Jaber House, a stunning mansion built for a wealthy Ottoman merchant family in 1896. As you make your way up through the exhibits, the history of As-Salt comes to life. Artifacts from the many cultures that held power here are thoughtfully laid out, showing all aspects of the city over the last 2,000 years. Traditional clothing, currency, art and jewelry, maps of trade routes, it all comes together to tell a long and fascinating story of this place and its people. But half the appeal is the space itself. The Abu Jaber House is considered the finest example of the architecture of As-Salt's golden age, and getting to wander freely among its rooms, hallways, and terraces gives you a unique insight into what life during the Ottoman years would have been like for the city's elite. As much as I love wandering the streets and alleyways, appreciating the architecture, I rarely get to see the other side of the coin. And given how gorgeous the many faded facades of As-Salt are, it's a special experience to get to step beyond one of their thresholds. Once you've learned your history, it's time to move on to what was, for me, the main attraction of As-Salt. The historic city center was awarded UNESCO World Heritage status in 2021, and the Jordanian government responded in kind by making As-Salt the country's first story town. That is tourist marketing speak for really cool place you should definitely visit. And with this moniker came the creation of one of the best state-organized tourism programs I've ever seen. In addition to setting up the museum, the authorities have laid out a fantastic walking tour which takes you through the plaza and into the winding streets of the city. Grab a map at the museum and get to wandering. As you follow the tour, it takes you to all of the fascinating spots As-Salt has to offer, from the city's main mosque to old mansions, workshops, and religious sites. Of particular note is St. George's Church, a stunning Orthodox parish built in 1682. Its central feature is a small cave in which the eponymous saint appeared to a shepherd, instructing him to build the church around it. Given Christ's importance to both Christians and Muslims, followers of both faiths are welcome to pray here, and its antique frescoes and intricately carved iconostasis give the church an air of ancient reverence. But this is just one amazing sight along the walking tour. And given how many fascinating places there are to discover, the most enjoyable part is just taking in the vibe of the city. The architecture is lovingly weathered, and you get the sense that each building has its own story to tell. It's all a part of what gives Es Salt its unique vintage charm. Beyond the museum, the historical sites, and the endless opportunities for strolling and appreciating, you'll find that Es Salt still has more to give. When it comes to food, our pick was the venerable restaurant Al Gherbal. Lying along Es Salt's more modern Prince Hasma Street, Al Gherbal is as much a cultural exhibition as it is an eatery. Housed in another of the city's gorgeous Ottoman-era residences, in between the dining areas are rooms filled with antiquities, staged to show you what daily domesticity would have looked like 200 years ago. But this focus on historical context hasn't affected the food, not one bit. Al Gherbal whipped us up some of the best food we had in the entire country. Staples like hummus, bread, and fried halloumi were top-notch, but the real standouts were the muhammara, a thick jam of sweet peppers and pomegranate molasses, and sambusak, perfectly fried pastries filled with spiced lamb and herbs. And all this is set to spectacular views out over the neighborhoods of Es Salt. If you find yourself in this wonderful little city, do not skip this place. It's truly fantastic. But as we left Al Gherbal to make our way back to the car and ultimately Amman, we were met with one last surprise. Across the street lies Es Salt's vibrant souk. This bustling market street is not your average tourist trap. It is a living, breathing lifeline for the city, serving the community's needs for all their daily staples. Of course, if it's trinkets you're after, you'll have no trouble finding them here. But this is a market for the people of this city first and foremost, and for tourists second. And it's likely been that way for as long as anyone here can remember. To me, it is the perfect summary of exactly what Es Salt is all about. As we wandered through the nooks and crannies of Es Salt, I realized that my initial impression of this city wasn't quite right. It's not that it's frozen in the past, it's more like time here moves slower somehow, more deliberately. Each turn down a new path, each stairway, each new bit of architecture makes you stop and think. You breathe in the dry air, noticing features and details you normally wouldn't. This is a place where moments in time are framed, like the intricate windows and doorways of the storied buildings all around you. It gives the city a feeling of calm gratitude that hit me deeper than I could have expected. Even though I've lived my life on the other side of the planet and was raised in a culture that couldn't be more different, I found a strange sense of nostalgia welling up inside me. Faces will change, trends will shift, powers will come and go. But through it all, life here has and will always go on. Those old movies that I mentioned, maybe that's what they were trying to capture, if only indirectly. This unshakable sense of place, of a city's culture as an immovable object in the face of unstoppable time. But in Es Salt, they seem to have found just the right trick, because try as it might, time hasn't moved much here. And from my perspective, I hope it never does.